The Shingwetsi River flows west to east across the Kruger National Park, and its basin is home to large herds of buffalo and elephant. It's ephemeral, and much of the time the river is dry, but don't let that fool you. There's water flowing beneath the surface, and deep roots plumb the alluvial sands. The banks are lined with huge sycamore figs, leadwoods, mahogany, and apple leaf, and it always pays to look up. The canopy is filled with interesting birds and monkeys.
There's a real presence to Kruger, and I think it comes because of its vast size. It's 400 kilometers long, about I think 28,000 or 22,000 square kilometers of bush, and there's so many different regions to it where different types of animals frequent different areas. For example, there's hardly any rhino in this area, but there's lots of buffalo and elephant. I just wish the people a couple of hundred years ago had the political balls to create larger reserves, because we've lost so much of South Africa. We've lost the entire Highveld, effectively, which was covered in wonderful plains game, thousands and thousands of animals, a majestic thing that we've just lost forever. We can't even imagine what it looked like. We just have first-hand accounts of herds passing the same position for 2 days straight. What a place it would be if we still had that. But this presence, this character, this personality of Kruger, some of it is due to its size. It's the ability for a person to get lost within it, and that doesn't happen in the smaller reserves of South Africa. You always feel near the boundaries and near the fences, or you can see evidence of man in pylons or distant lights. Kruger's different. Kruger, you can feel like you're back in an untouched landscape, almost. And that's important.
The camp at Shingwetsi is 89 years old, and the first visitors arrived in 1933. But the protected area is older still, proclaimed in 1903 in the ashes of the war that formed the nation of South Africa. This was, and still is to some degree, the last wild frontier. Elephants are a big part of the attraction along the Shingwetsi River, so it was only natural to run into a bull, half asleep, in the wet morning light. He had unusually white and gleaming tusks, not as big as old Shingwetsi's, a giant that roamed the area for 65 years and whose tusks can still be seen in the Elephant Museum at Letaba, but decent, and I thought I'd make a wildlife pano. I've described the process in some of my other videos, so I'll leave a link. The shots can sometimes have a dreamy feel to them because it's unusual to have such a shallow depth of field in a wide wildlife scene.
I was depressed this morning. I got up about half an hour late because I heard rain dripping on the thatch above my head, and I'd opened the window and it looked grey and miserable outside, and in that weather it makes pretty much no difference if I'm half an hour late for sunrise. But then, when I opened the door, I saw the skies were clearing and the clouds were overhead and the sun was coming up gently in the east. And I thought, whoa, I'm late to the party, I've got to get out there. The sun's just rising on my left. And it's beautiful to see that yellow light and the wet ground and the drips on the trees and the smell of damp earth. There's no dust, there's no heat. Today is going to be a magical day, I feel.
It's not long before I run into a second sighting in an open area of grassland. The soft, wet soil is a fertile hunting ground for this Kori bustard. You can tell that it doesn't like my approach, as it strides directly away from the road without taking flight. And although it can fly, it will generally try not to. In fact, the male Kori bustard may be the heaviest living animal still capable of flight. They're beautiful birds, especially in courtship, with magnificent head feathers and the ability to puff out their neck. Like many of Africa's larger birds, the changing face of the continent is making it harder for them to survive.
There's something everybody does in Kruger, and it's a weird thing. It's a friendly wave. I don't know who started it. Probably sometime in the distant past when the first vehicle tourists arrived here in the 20s, 30s, 40s maybe. Someone waved at someone else, and it's been happening in Kruger ever since. You can't stop it. Every time you pass a vehicle, you wave at them, which is cool. It's nice. Or maybe it's something to do with the loneliness that one experiences here. Even when the park is pretty full, you don't see that many people. I've only seen about 3 people this morning, 1 per hour.
Take a train ride just to see you. Ride for hours just to please you. You don't know how much I need you. 'Cause you're my home away from home, away from home, away from being alone. Run away from home, why don't you? 'Cause I did the same just for you. You don't know how.
Some of the crocodiles down there must be 12 or 13 feet long, and that must mean they're old. Nile crocodiles live between 60 and 100 years, and I think the oldest known croc, Henry, is 122, born sometime around 1900. There's a strict social hierarchy, and the biggest males get the best basking spots on the riverbank. It's definitely not safe down there. The smaller crocs can reach speeds of 20 kilometers an hour, which is probably faster than me, and they're sometimes found ambush hunting under logs or on game trails well away from water. I think it's wonderful that such exotic dinosaurs can still survive so prolifically in the modern world. What a sight.
Take a train ride just to see you. Ride for hours just to please you. You don't know how much I need you. 'Cause you're my home away from home, away from home, away from being alone.
Hippos and crocodiles seem to have a complex relationship. Crocs are predators, but hippos are dangerous for everyone. You'd be a brave croc to take on a pod of hippos. And don't let their size fool you. They play like porpoises in the water, weightless and in their element. But I've also seen hippos shepherd other animals away from danger. I don't know if I'm anthropomorphizing them, but I like to think that they care. These hippo are just too far away to make a good photograph. They're low down, there's branches between me and them, there's even heat distortion in the air. And even though I'm toting an 800mm lens in this case, I'm just not going to get a shot. And that's one of the reasons I shoot video. Where a photo won't work, a video probably will.
Well, the sun's been out since this morning. It's 1:45 now. I think most people have gone back to camp for lunch, I guess. I like to skip lunch because there's so much happening out here. And it may not always lead to fantastic photographs because the light's harsh. But sometimes it does, and sometimes the behavior is worth just watching itself, without the photograph. And I've been sitting here watching these hippos, fascinated by them. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a yellow-billed kite swooped down along the riverbank and picked up some sort of chick or something, carried it up into the air and started pulling the feathers out on the wing and eating it. You don't get to see that stuff if you're sitting at base camp eating a ham sandwich. Just stay out here. We'll bring the sandwich with you, even better. Sandwiches.
The rivers that cut through the Mopani Felt are like arteries for nature. The Mopani monotony seems absolutely sterile by comparison. Tall trees line the banks, and this riverine forest is ripe with all kinds of sightings. One of my favourites is the African hoopoe. I'll take any chance to watch them. I especially love their melodic call, which echoes all through this woodland. Because I'm stuck inside Basel, it's really hard to photograph any ground-feeding birds, and I was lucky to come across a pair foraging on a thickly wooded reverse slope. The pair were being closely watched by a drongo which swept in to steal a meal. It took me completely by surprise. My eye was glued to the viewfinder switching into video, and it took me and the hoopoe a while to recover. I'm happy to say the hoopoe won. Animals in Kruger don't just use rivers as a resource. They're important avenues for movement too. In the winter months, when water is scarce, animals travel further between feeding and drinking sites, and so increase their risks of predation. I crossed the Babubu, a tributary of the Shingwetsi, in the late afternoon. Driving slowly along the northern bank, I was able to peer down into the sun-dappled shade. My first encounter was with a herd of Cape buffalo, lowing in the dripping yellow light. I think that most of my wildlife photography is an attempt to express atmosphere. It's not really about animal portraits or necessarily getting close and detailed shots. I'm much more interested in how the scene makes me feel. And feelings are difficult to convey in a photograph because they require a common experiential point of reference. For many, the sight of a herd of buffalo moving through the dust of a late afternoon is alien. The scene is experienced differently. For me, it's a comforting expression of home. The slow pace of an afternoon in sinking light. Elephants, almost mythic, cracking branches and humming to each other. That low song, more felt than heard. The precisely beautiful impala, dipped in gold. The severe owlet, quietly watching all. I can't know what it means to you to see these things, but surely the power in photographs lies here, in the hope that we feel the same. Because this video isn't trying to sell anything or review anything, it's likely to get lost in the YouTube algorithm, unless you do me a big favor. If you've liked it, please leave a thumbs up down below, maybe leave a comment, and better still, share it. And I'll see you in the next video.